Well, as we get ready to talk about the industry, let's talk about our theme for today, which is really reimagining growth. There's so much in our industry that's exciting and happening, and we've all been really thinking as we've been preparing for months for today about areas that we want to see growth change. How can we continue to elevate? This industry has always been about reimagining and changing, and how do we raise the bar? One thing I'm particularly passionate about is how we raise the bar beyond just natural. And we've never been just natural, don't get me wrong. But how do we take natural and continue to elevate nutrition? We know our country, our planet, our communities need elevated nutrition. So for me, that's really great for reimagined, as well as how we combine that with good for our communities and good for our planet. How about you, Carlotta?
Well, I agree, and I'm wearing this shirt today that says mindset is everything, which it truly is. And if the pandemic taught us anything, it's how powerful our mindset is in terms of perceiving what is happening around us. And there's a lot of, signals that could maybe be perceived as negative about what's happening with the economy, what's possibly happening with our industry or with specific, in organizations with our industry. And there's also a really powerful way that we can shift that perspective to see the longer term view, to see the optimism, the hope, the opportunity in any situation. And so we're going to share a lot of data today that can hopefully help you shift into that very positive, abundant perspective.
And I think Carlotta's point about the economy, there's been a lot of talk about that. We're going to talk a lot about that today. But, I think this is a time when, we have to look forward and we look at the underlying trends of the industry, and things are still very, very positive. And if we get caught in looking at, what's happened in the last 12 months instead of what's looking forward, it can compromise our growth. And I think if we approach all complex problems in life from a point of looking forward and looking at expansiveness and not getting caught in a scarcity mindset, we will be much more effective. And I think that theme resonates through today.
Amen.
Absolutely.
So, lots to talk about the economy, so that's how we're going to lead off. We are not in a recession right now. We're nothing like a recession. We're in a strange time. But what is really going on, and this is something that I spent a lot of time digging into here because there is so much chatter, is we had a tremendous amount of stimulus hit this economy, about as much stimulus as a quarter the size of the economy, and that is going to very, very predictably cause inflation of about 25%. And you can see in 2021 on the right there, those four higher lines, that's how much growth we had in 1 year. And if you look over the past years, you don't see growth like that. That's all stimulus driven. So now we have to kind of unwind that. It's kind of like you've gone out and you've had a big party and you wake up and you feel terrible. You've got to unwind that. So we're in a hangover. And hangovers go away. So anyway, so you can see we actually had 2 quarters of growth. I put this slide up at Expo West and we had 2 down quarters. And I was saying, this is mean reversion. This is not a recession. I'm really happy we had 2 positive. We could go into a recession, but right now, if you look at these tailwinds, you look at that labor line in the bottom bright green, we have a lot of positive. Next slide. So, what is going on broadly? Well, you can see in the chart on the left, inflation's been high. Everybody knows this. We had our first rate hike right around the turn of the year. And as you can see, immediately, inflation stopped going up. In fact, it started going down in Q2 and is down a lot in Q3. So rate hikes are effective. If we do go into a recession, they're effective the other way too. We can reduce rates and come out. So this is very controllable both ways. And if you read too much in the articles out there, you see there's lots of things about layoffs. So I had to put a chart up of technology, which is where you've seen the layoffs. And if you look at that chart, the blue below the line, that's the amount of the layoffs. The green above is how many people were hired since COVID started. These are not a lot of people getting laid off. Next slide. In the industry, we've had a pullback away from food sales at home. And this has happened for a couple of reasons. One of the big ones is that there's been a shift back to food service. There's a big shift away during COVID. We've seen that go back. That's the chart on the left. You can see how that mirrors. Food at home is on the bottom, food service is on the top. This year, it's about 5%, 4.9 just this year of decreased sales because of that. If you look on the right, the orange lines are inflation and the yellow is food sale demand, food at home demand. So you can see the consumer hung in there. But once inflation got to an annualized rate of over 10%, they broke and they started pulling back. And so you can see that real growth, that's inflation-adjusted growth, went way down. And as soon as inflation started going down, it came right back up. So as long as we don't believe that we're going to live in this environment of accelerating inflation and restaurants getting more and more and more sales, things are going to start to accelerate in this industry.
So how is all of this impacting the natural and organic industry? The good news is that while growth did slow from 2020, when we experienced record sales expansion due to all of the unprecedented pantry loading and other dynamics of the pandemic, the industry continued to grow last year despite these impacts of inflation that Nick just talked about. And in 2022, the total natural and organic products industry grew 5.4% to reach $278 billion in U.S. consumer sales, according to early estimates from New Hope's Nutrition Business Journal. And the colored circles at the right show you how each industry products category performed last year in relation to one another. Now, food and beverage, natural and organic food and beverage, functional food and beverage performed the best, followed by natural living, which is made up of personal care, household products, pet products. And then supplements really had the roughest 2022, which we'll discuss in a little more depth soon. And total industry sales are expected to surpass the $300 billion benchmark this year. And this would represent a doubling of industry sales over the last decade. And so that is a huge, huge deal.
How exciting.
It is. We are a sizable, impactful, meaningful industry. We're not a fad anymore. We're not this niche industry. I heard that a cab driver was bringing one of our attendees over and called this the granola conference. We're no longer the granola conference, the granola industry. We're very mainstream, and we're projected to reach $338 billion in sales by 2025. And so, given the lasting ways that the pandemic changed consumer behaviors and the new customers who entered the industry over the last few years, overall sales volume remains above Nutrition Business Journal's pre-COVID projections. So we've got this big boost during the pandemic, and we're projecting that we will continue to see the positive impacts of that boost well into the future. And so that's, again, really good news for our industry.
And this resilience also continues across all channels of trade, which is exciting. We see everyone continuing to flourish, whether that's natural supermarkets, regional grocery, conventional mainstream, more national chain stores, or even convenience. Natural products are growing across all. And you can see natural supermarkets have lagged just a little bit, but we're going to talk about that later. A lot of that is because they haven't taken as much price, which could be an opportunity potentially as well. But certainly, important message is, again, resilience and just how large this industry is becoming, and all are flourishing. The tides are really rising.
And so we'll take a look at each specific category in a little more depth. And so, as I noted, natural and organic and functional food and beverage sales really drove the greatest growth for our industry last year, and in fact outperformed the industry as a whole, in part because of the challenging year that supplements had last year. And according to NBJ's estimates, natural, organic, and functional food and beverage sales increased 6.6% to $199 billion. So we're almost at that $200 billion mark. And some of the categories that did quite well: carbonated drinks, all of those gut-healthy sodas that are hitting the market, and other carbonated drinks, those are bubbling up to the top of the best food and beverage categories in terms of sales, followed by dairy alternatives last year, better-for-you sweeteners, baby products, and canned and dry soup. And 2022 was actually an amazing standout year for soup, which Catherine's going to tell us a bit more about in a little bit. But when was the last time we talked about soup in the state of the industry? And organic. And what's amazing about organic is that growth in organic bounced back in 2022, with sales increasing from the 1.9% we saw in 2021 to an estimated 4.6% in 2022. And the organic food and beverage category has now surpassed the $50 billion mark. And this represents a doubling of organic food and beverage sales since 2014. I'm a huge advocate of organic, and so that's really, really good news for the organic industry and for our industry as a whole. Not surprising, the baby food category was really a standout product category for organic. That's often an entryway into organic for a lot of consumers, but we also had some more surprising categories that performed quite well last year in organic. Candy, dips are so popular right now. Soft drinks, yogurt, all of those in the organic space also did quite well. And we're expecting to continue to see, strong, stable growth for organic into the future. Looking at functional food and beverages. Now, this is another category that performed quite well, a little better than the total industry as a whole last year. And we saw 5.8% growth in 2022. And again, some of the categories that really helped drive this: sports and energy drinks. Anything focused on hydration, energy has been doing quite well. Again, those soft drinks, those healthier soda drinks, those frozen, so we're seeing functional frozen desserts. We're seeing snacks and chips and so many products that are providing functional benefits in addition to more of a clean label, healthier products. Electrolytes, mushrooms, adaptogens such as ashwagandha, healthy fats, prebiotics. These are still the really powerhouse functional ingredients that are driving a lot of innovation and growth in our industry. So this is a slide that just shows kind of what's happening. I think this is a good representation of some of the roller coaster that's been happening over the last few years for food in general. And the orange line on this slide speaks to the conventional food and beverage sales and how they were impacted really the most by the pandemic in 2020 with all of that pantry loading, and then inflation in 2022 with a lot of the increases in product prices that we saw, especially starting on the conventional side. And, surprisingly, or not surprisingly really, the yellow line represents how relatively stable the natural and organic products industry has been over the last couple of years compared to conventional. Typically, we have seen over the last decade natural and organic really outpacing conventional in growth. And that's not what we saw as we saw these big surges due to the pandemic or inflation. But we are expecting that as the economy stabilizes, we will once again see natural and organic outpacing conventional food and beverages from a sales growth perspective. So supplements, I've mentioned a couple of times, 2022 was a tough year, and part of that is just because of the roller coaster that supplements has been on. See this yellow line? So in 2020, the supplement industry had record growth of 14.5%, and that was really driven by that spike in consumer interest and demand for immune-boosting products, anything that as we were all in our homes, anything that we felt would support our overall health and wellness and help prevent us from getting sick. Last year, we continued to see strong growth as consumers had come into the industry and were continuing to buy new products and really look to support their overall immune health and support. So we saw 7.5% growth in 2021. And then last year, as inflation started to pick up, we really saw that growth take quite a dive, and we only had 1.7% growth for the industry last year. Still, we surpassed that $60 billion mark, and we are expecting that things will once again stabilize, and we'll get back to mid-single-digit growth, which is quite, normal for the supplement industry moving forward. A couple of surprises that we saw in supplements last year. During the pandemic, because of just the type of products that supplements are, they're very, very well suited to direct-to-consumer e-commerce, and there was a huge surge in growth in e-commerce during the pandemic. And we were actually anticipating that this might, hold for supplements moving out of the pandemic, but actually e-commerce sales growth for supplements really came down in 2022 and dipped into the single digits for the first time since we've been tracking e-commerce sales. A category like herbs and botanicals has been so strong for the last 5-7 years. We saw that category even slow. And the category that in supplements was really a standout were sports nutrition and weight management. Those surged into double-digit growth last year as a lot of us were looking for products that could help us get back to our active lifestyles, maybe shed some of those extra pandemic pounds. And so again, you see this roller coaster for supplements over the last couple of years. And if you want to know more about supplements, my colleague Claire Morton will be providing a state of the supplements industry session along with other team members at 10 a.m. today, so right after this session in Marriott Grand Ballroom F if you want to know more about supplements. And so let's look at industry sales by channel. Again, this is a pretty dramatic story for 2022. And that is, again, that e-commerce sales really slowed considerably last year, not just for supplements, but for products across the industry as a whole. And again, that permanent shift into e-commerce that we thought we might see post-pandemic, that is not what we're seeing right now. And so this, again, marks the first time that we've seen for our industry really this kind of a pullback in e-commerce sales growth since we've been tracking this. And we know that, you know, brick and mortar retail is really where the vast majority of our sales continue to be rung up. And once again, the mass market channel outperformed all other channels from a growth standpoint last year, growing at 7.7% for the total industry, which is again outperforming total industry growth. And 60% of sales are now made up in the mass market. And we continue to expect continued strong mass market sales growth moving forward.
And as another data point to really kind of support that story, and especially looking at supplements in this case, again, going back to that, because it's such a strong data-driven story here. I don't know if you remember in the fall at Expo East, we took a look at Spin's Amazon data for supplements, as well as all of our brick and mortar data. The group here on the left is Expo East. And the way to read this, the blue is brick and mortar sales. The first column being 67% of sales back last fall for supplements was coming in our Spins measured channels from brick and mortar. But you can see 85% of the growth was coming. So we were already seeing that shift and reverting back to a normal curve. But now look, on the right now, it's even more dramatic. So it's still about the same percentage of sales. It's been growing a little because of math tells you from the one from the east. But look, 92% of growth is coming from brick and mortar stores for supplements. This is really telling us that this is a big shift to come back to more normal growth curves and something we anticipate. Just a great, bright story for the future. However, it also means we heard yesterday's, one of the panels for Climate Day, Jason saying one of the ways to really engage with your consumers is to combine that digital and in-store experience. And we think, the huge peaks that we had during COVID got customers used to thinking this way. And so I think make sure we're always, whether you're a brand or a retailer, to blend that experience between your digital or e-commerce experience and your brick and mortar experience.
And so we've talked about mass, we've talked about e-commerce. We can't not talk about how important the natural and specialty channel is to our industry, helped build this industry. And New Hope recently did some consumer work, which I think helped us create this slide and really pays homage to how important the natural channel shopper is to our industry. So this is research based on the drivers for consumers buying a new product for the first time. And what we find with the green bars is that natural channel shoppers actually under-index on price. So they're less price sensitive, but they're really over-indexing on other qualities. They're looking for taste, they're looking for ingredient quality, they're looking for superior nutrition, health claims, sustainability. So again, this natural channel shopper is really important because they align with the values of our industry.
And related, the values-oriented shopper is a really important and valuable shopper. And as Carlotta said, they do shop differently. And they're frequent shoppers. 88% are buying groceries at least once a week, the values-oriented shopper. This is 20% more frequent than the typical shopper. They're adventurous. Again, boy, does that just not support some of the things, Carlotta, you just said that they're really looking for. 65% of values-oriented consumers identify with themselves as extremely or very adventurous. That's 2.5 times more adventurous than the typical consumer. I'm guessing every one of you in the room is identifying with that moment of thinking about how adventurous you are. and the spirit of roaming the aisles here at Expo. So it's really important to understand this values-based consumer and how they shop. And when you may be saying, well, what do you mean values-oriented? Well, again, this is coming from a spin survey we just finished up. And you can see there's areas of importance. There's a variety. Our values are what are important to us. Now, we'd all say every one of the things probably on this slide are important, but we ask these values-oriented shoppers to say, what's most important to you? And you can see there are a real variety of choices of what's rising to the top. And particularly note, again, really important why so many of us were here for Climate Day yesterday is look how high good for the planet types of things are now really popping up. Which, again, ways that we can continue raising the bar, not only in what's good for our health, but what's good for people and good for the planet as well.
And this is just a quick data point, again, to speak to how important these natural channel shoppers are. They do so much more research compared to a conventional shopper, so they're really paying attention to what they're buying. And they're doing a lot of this research online, so as a brand, as well as a retailer, you must be thinking about how you're creating a true omni-channel experience for that shopper that's doing research in your aisles or doing research on your specific product before they decide to make a purchase. So let's dig in a little bit deeper into the economy and how it impacted and has been impacting our industry.
Great. So the next few slides, in the spirit of time, I'm going to move really quickly. So I want to point out again what Carlotta said, that there's a tremendous amount of data in these slides. We very intentionally put lots of data through these so you can go back and spend time digging in and using them, hopefully, around your businesses and in what you do. So listen to the themes more than trying to read the slides necessarily a whole lot. So we mentioned earlier that the natural channel had, while still very resilient and strong natural products growth, solid, I should say, it was lagging a little behind some of the more mainstream. This particular chart is showing the change, this is the last 4 weeks, versus a year ago of average base price. And the green bar over on the, whatever that is, right, is the natural channel. And you can see it's about, 350 points less than what some of the more mainstream channels are. So this gets reflected in the sales growth. So I just want to point that out. It's great that natural retailers, that you've been staying really competitive, in terms of pricing, but it's also an opportunity to say you've got an adventurous shopper who's often willing to pay a little more. You may want to think, well, you still have the window to take some chance to take up some price and go forward. We pulled some government CPI numbers just to see where is inflation happening. What's interesting, and you'll see some more on this later, is you can see categories that are processed categories are many of the ones that have actually taken the most price, whether it's bakery or cereal or dairy products. Some of the group in the middle, the more fresh related, like produce, meats, poultry, eggs, and yes, eggs are very high priced, as we'll look at in a second, didn't take as much price overall. Fascinating, probably counter to what we often think about in inflationary times and maybe some of the underlying drivers. And of course, that's then resulted in food at home actually having higher increases than food away. So it's just a really interesting dynamic. And what we've also seen, and it's going to be interesting to watch this over time, is that consumption at home, because of concerns over the economy and what's happening, it's continuing to go back up again. People are cooking at home; they've been starting to venture out. So we're it's back over 80%. Whereas just before COVID, it was down in the 50s. So let's look at some categories quickly. These are the top categories that there's been inflation. Eggs, top of the list. You can see all products increases versus natural or NPI, the SPINS definition for natural. And then to the right is private label growth. So what you see here, obviously, generally, is that many of these categories are experiencing a lot of increases from everyday pricing, but then private label is going up at the same time. So that means, in other words, the sales of private label, consumers are switching. As things get more expensive, they're shifting to a retailer's brand. But there's another really interesting dynamic that we've been digging into with IRI, our partner on panel data, looking at eggs. So price of conventional eggs have gone up far more than natural eggs. So that gap has gotten smaller. So what happened was sometimes the consumer said, I think I'm going to trade up. I'm going to try that natural egg. And for any of us that have ever tasted a Vital Protein egg and just looked at it when you open, you see that gorgeous yellow yolk, and then you never want to go back. Well, the numbers are telling us that's some of what's happened. Household penetration, the buyers increased 23% for NPI eggs during this inflationary period. And the conventional buyer trip stayed about flat. And these people stayed. So, and this isn't just eggs. You're like, oh, whatever, that's eggs. It's gorgeous yolk. it happened in other places too. We saw it in general across all of produce and refrigerated. So this is a wonderful opportunity. There's a silver lining in some of this inflation. That is that gap has narrowed. People came in and they've tried it. So really exciting to see.
For the first year since COVID hit, the NPI, which is the Natural Products Index in SPINS, it's about the 9% healthiest brands in there, has actually outpaced all of the other brands, the bigger brands, in price increases. And this is really positive that we can take price, because it's been a margin hit not to. And being able to restore our margins to our full potential is going to accelerate the capital cycle in the industry. It's going to make more M&A happen, which is going to drive more investment in innovation.
At the same time, we always want to be sure, how do we make sure where we can in a macroeconomic environment that people have access to healthier foods when they want them? We know there's a macro trend towards more whole foods. So on this chart, the blue represents sort of processed foods, we'll call it, like center store. And I'm making a simplistic statement, of course. The green is fresh categories. In other words, produce, peel-used meat, things like that. And you can see this is, again, counterintuitive that processed foods actually increase prices higher, faster, more than fresh foods. So those who were seeking still, and you can see consumers generally were not wanting to make trade-offs to avoid produce and healthy foods. Consumers could still buy the healthy products that they were looking for, in fresh and meat and poultry, which was really fantastic. And certainly just another quick data point, beans, soup mixes, some of these are categories that, regardless, the units were going up as well as the dollar sales as people felt inflationary pressure.
So where did inflation hit the consumer? So we peeled into the Nielsen IQ data, and we looked at household income, age, household members, and ethnicity. What we found is that generally low income is actually outpacing wage growth still in this economic time. So lower income did better than higher income. There's more food demand there. You can see much more growth, 14% versus roughly 10. Age, generally older people, boomers, have fared better. They've had more demand, except for this small little micro pocket of 18 to 24. Household members, bigger families hurt more, very intuitive. And ethnicity, white outperformed non-white, but Hispanic was actually the highest demand increase of all the sectors, which is really interesting.
And so we wanted to understand how consumers are experiencing, feeling the economy. Remember, mindset is everything. So there's reality, and then there's perceived reality, which becomes reality. And so with our survey partner, Susie, we surveyed U.S. consumers every month over the last few months to understand, again, what are their perceptions and how is this changing their behavior? And these charts show from our latest survey in February. And as you can see, the majority of consumers are reporting that they're feeling increased pressure, stress due to the rising cost of goods, and have changed their grocery shopping behaviors due to this extra stress or pressure that they're feeling with inflation. And 40%, so less than half, reported being worse off financially than 1 year ago. So less are actually worse off financially, but they're feeling the stress of the economy. And digging in a little bit deeper to this research, we found that, again, to those changing behaviors, 74% of consumers reported buying more grocery products that are on sale. 67% reported doing more meal planning and sticking to a grocery list. So still cooking at home and trying to save a little money there. 66% are using coupons or discount codes. And interestingly, this research didn't show as much of a shift when it comes to moving away from organic or purchases of natural, organic, or humanely raised meat or poultry. And so we're finding that a lot of consumers are sticking with their values. And this is not just natural channel consumers. This represents the US population. They're sticking with their values and finding other creative ways to be able to save a little bit of money.
And certainly another one of those mechanisms often is, again, as noted, private label. The yellow bar is the growth of private label versus the blue is national brand. And story tells itself. Certainly during these phases, private label has been very much outpacing as folks look for ways to help their dollar go further. And it's really a fantastic opportunity as retailers have been continuing to up their game in their private label quality and offerings to get trial and then hold on to some of these customers as well. So here's the soup story that Carlotta mentioned earlier. So soup, again, when we talked about soup, we've seen 14% growth overall in soup, but it's not necessarily, a story that's been created equal. What's fascinating is ramen and instant noodle. Who really thought we'd ever talk about ramen and instant noodle at Expo, right? But these are segments within soup that are showing incredible growth. And yes, you may say this is the product I ate in college or whatever it was, but it's not necessarily. We did find that consumers were switching because, again, these were more affordable options. But if you look at the next slide, this is not what it was when we were in college. Now, that's still there. Trust me, I think my college son is probably still buying it when his money runs out. But certainly, this is a place often when we see innovation come into a category, we see it in different ways. Premium indulgences, cleaner ingredients, and truly becoming better for you. And this is certainly instant noodles, blocks, and cups is not what it was when we used to sit at the shelf and buy whatever 5 for $1. So you can see just some of the fantastic innovation, whether it's different diets and lifestyles for choices or high proteins. It's just completely different game, but it's still a less expensive, full nutrient dense. There is nutrient now in this segment that can come into choices.
So one of the things that we want to think about is how we reimagine growth in this industry, and that's kind of where we're going next. And when we think about the broader economy, if we look at the chart on the left, you can see over the last 60 years or so, GDP has had a trend of declining growth every year. And that is because our labor productivity growth rate has gone about in half from where it was in the last, later part of the century. And a lot of that comes from, our life expectancy went up and it's kind of slowing down at how fast it's going up. More life expectancy means more productivity. Our population growth rate is also declining. These are the two big inputs of economic growth. So we need another catalyst, and we're going to be talking about that in the next sections here.
So I mentioned at the beginning earlier, how do we raise the bar to increase nutrition, in many of the products of our industry, upping that nutrition game? So let's take a quick look at some of the recent findings.
Yes, so wanted to share some of the trends. So my team at New Hope tracks trends in the industry based on all of the new products that we're seeing coming into the show. And this research shows that, we've got about 3,100 exhibitors this year, and, more than 800, approaching 900 of those companies are first-time exhibitors. And the trends we're seeing on this slide really show nutrition-focused trends, because New Hope surveyed the community last year to understand, how does this industry define itself? And standing out above all of the findings was that this industry defines itself around human health and providing products that support human health. And so these are some of the trends that are related to nutrition that we see across the products on the show floor. Now, you'll notice that these percentages are pretty low, but that's because there are so many new products, so many trends that we track. But some of the big nutrition-focused trends are things like sugar vilified. We're seeing a lot of innovation to reduce sugar content in products. Digestive health. There's a lot still focused on plant-based, but it's really more whole food nutrition that can be provided through plants.
And, again, one of the ways that we see the industry sort of manifesting this increased nutrition is in providing more and more alternatives to alcoholic beverages. I mean, certainly I've never seen a dry January so mainstream in the press. And, I would also say, by the way, maybe if the economy had converted to non-alcoholic beverages from his earlier point, we wouldn't have had the hangover that we're in now, right? But seriously, there's so many alternatives now. I mean, we've got kombucha growing back again largely to a lot of the no sugar or low sugar alternatives. And just these many areas you can see of growth sort of pictured here, whether it's CBD beverages that are still giving that relaxation, or hot teas and waters, or the non-alcoholic, new innovation in non-alcoholic spirits and wines and beers. It's just fantastic. And in addition to that, if we look at carbonated soft drinks, certainly an area that is just really being transformed, because it sort of doesn't have the same stigma maybe of sugars and something that's not that good for you, because now we're seeing these are non-alcoholic alternatives, and there's so many benefits that are being launched. You can see just a few examples here: probiotics, prebiotics, functional ingredients. Again, other ways to find relaxation or mood support. Just so much innovation continuing to come in, and we expect this is going to even further continue to accelerate as more and more consumers are really looking for sort of ways to get that craft cocktail fun and adventure, bringing into a non-alcoholic beverage.
And this just shares a little consumer research about why people are choosing non-alcoholic options. And it's not surprising to me to see that consumers are finding many different motivations for choosing non-alcoholic. I chose to give up alcohol in 2016 for many of these reasons. And as information is finally being published about the health impacts of alcohol consumption, we do see that the number one driver is preventing negative health issues that can be associated with overusing alcohol.
All right, now we're going to switch for a moment to a very different fiber. Fiber is not something we talk about a lot. It feels like it's not the sexiest of ingredients that's been top of mind, even though we've had lots of discussion around digestive health and the importance of the microbiome. And we really believe fiber is going to continue to come more and more to the forefront. It's, again, fantastic way to elevate nutrition. The typical American gets really only 50% of the amount of fiber intake they should a day. So this really is an area as we think about functional ingredients getting added back into more and more products. Fiber we're going to see playing a much larger role, we think, as we go forward. And let's look at an example. I've talked about ramen, and now I'm talking about mac and cheese. Again, is this a parallel universe of Expo or what? Again, other than maybe ramen in college, everyone's favorite feel-good food is mac and cheese. Kraft has certainly for decades been innovating, and in fact, even a decade ago, took out a lot of the artificial things that are in there. Certainly, our industry has really continued to innovate along the way as well. Annie's certainly were probably one of the original challenger brands of the industry in its entirety, with fantastic, still has over 40 varieties selling in natural supermarkets. And then you see, again, still more ways to be expansive, as you said earlier, in this great category with chickpeas coming out, and good for the earth as well as good for health. Look at the growth rates there with high fiber, high protein, and then Goodle, same thing with fiber and protein. So just great opportunities to up the game with fiber. And similarly, not only do we see plant-based, but now plant-forward ingredients even further coming in, elevating that game, and just some of the great ways to get more fiber and nutrition and elevate overall these categories. Now, these next, they're going to move really fast, and there's a lot of data, because again, we've been hitting a lot of these themes throughout. But really, this idea of beverages medicine, how we bring more and more nutrition elevated into the products that we consume. Beverages aren't just for hydration anymore. We're looking for multiple ways that we can support our human health goals to feel better and to really up our nutrition. Another example, mushrooms. Again, another one, just digging deeper into some of the trends that Carlotta talked about earlier. What's interesting is, and this, for many reasons why supplements had a little more of a challenging year, but one really exciting silver lining, again, expansiveness, is just how much what used to come in supplements is now coming in food and beverages. And mushrooms are an amazing example of this. If you look at all the different categories, I mean, again, who would have thought you'd see these trends in cookies, crackers, snacks, and all these beverages, refrigerated juices for mushrooms. It's fantastic to see how we keep taking the nutrition game higher. And even again in stress supplements, not only are they in VMS, but there's now in body lotions and face lotions, many of these ingredients like ashwagandha or others that are no longer sitting in the supplement section, they're getting across the store. And what's fantastic is that these often in these other categories come at slightly lower price points. So again, it gets new customers in feeling this wonderful benefit of these various functional ingredients. So it's super exciting. And finally, just because I have to reinforce it one more time, more categories that we see ingredients upping the game. The way to read this is the yellow on the left is vitamins, mineral supplement growth trends. The orange in the middle of each of these is grocery, and then the gray is refrigerated. And you just see a number of ingredients here where you're really seeing this trend of things start often in supplements because you can get, start seeing the benefits of these sort of intense amounts or really higher dosages of some of these ingredients, but then you recognize that's really effective, and how can I put that and reach more consumers? And so, in fact, little tip, because it's the 15 years I've been here, I've seen this over and over and over, although the life cycle is hastening. watch the ingredients starting to pop and supplement and think about how you can apply them in your own brands. Or retailers, it's a great way to get far enough ahead in the curve of your private label development to really look at probably where these next ingredients are going to pop. Now let's jump into, that's a lot of nutrition I think I hit you with. Now let's talk even further about people and planet.
So talking about economic growth, if we take an expansive view of, looking at the pillars, the 4 pillars or so of, where we can find impact, and we look at it at both a macro level and a micro level, if we think about moving from an expense mindset, a scarcity mindset of this is a budget item, DEI is a cost center. And we, if it's a macro government thing, it's a spending bill, it's a budget impact. We can't afford this. We move it to an investment, an infrastructure investment, which is going to have a future return. That's expansive. In our industry, again, we look at it, we move from a cost center to a profit center. If we drive revenue, we drive margin. That becomes an investment. If it costs money today, it pays off later on. That's how business works. Next slide, please. So if we can actually take a lesson from infrastructure when we look at it. If we look historically, infrastructure's been things like airplanes, airports, trains, highways, and they were all built with expansiveness, right? They floated bonds. If you think about the interstate highway system, if we didn't have it today, we'd build it. It would cost us $10, $15 trillion, so we could get to the airport in 1 hour instead of 3, right? We'd build it. And the gas tax that's in place would deliver more tax revenue because people would drive more miles and burn more gas, and that pays the bonds off. It's a very expansive mindset. And if we look at infrastructure in terms of education, healthcare, arable land, and the ocean as the areas where we can take that same mindset, both at the macro level and at the industry level, we can make great strides in impact. Huge. So at the macro level, again, this all comes down to where are we going to get incremental tax and incremental GDP, which we can get in the 4, and at the industry level, it's where do we get incremental revenue. So thinking about JEDI, we have an increasingly diverse customer base. This country is diversifying very, very quickly. Brands that reach that diverse customer base get incremental revenue. If we look at healthcare, wellness, if we can increase the quality and length of life, customers are going to pay for that. We want to give consumers access to healthier options and knowledge of how to use them. In land, we want to increase the organic matter in soil. That's putting carbon in soil. It's making soil healthier. It's building ecosystems within it. We're reducing global warming, water usage in farming, and producing more nutritious food. And in the ocean, we want to maintain the 8.2 pH as best we can. And this is going to be more than our industry, but there's a lot of people growing kelp and things like that help. But the ocean's out of balance because it pulls carbon out of the atmosphere, it creates carbonic acid, and the more carbon we put in the atmosphere, the faster that happens. The rivers can't keep up with keeping that pH up. And so if we don't have a pH of 8.2, or if we don't have a pH about 7.9, we won't have fish one day. And fish is a $270 billion industry projected to go up about 8% a year. So there's real money there, as well as health. So if we look at it from an investor perspective, right now investors are having a hard time raising funds. That's one of the reasons why you've seen a little bit of a funding, kind of setback in 2022. Private equity was about 12% down in total in fundraising. That disproportionately hits the smaller funds, which are funding a lot of our innovation. But ESG funds actually had net positive inflows. That means there was more money going in than going out. And all other classes of funds went the other way. When markets go down, money goes out of funds. On the right, if you look at that, 37% of funds indicate that ESG is a main underwriting diligence area in 22, up from 21% in 21. The more that the funds can figure out a way to incorporate ESG in their strategy in an expansive way and quantify it using metrics like the economic value of sequestering a ton of carbon is somewhere between $200 and $500 based on the economic damage that's prevented. You can translate that into megawatts. You can look at an acre land. Keeping that land means that we're going to produce more food at peak population, which means we get more incremental tax and incremental GDP. That drives the economy. It also drives a better planet at the same time. These things come together. So looking at the micro level and brands, sustainability is outperforming right now. You can see the ESG dollar volume is up 14.4%. This is according to a Nielsen IQ and McKinsey study that was done, or big report. The total store 11.3. And if you look on the right, the highest ESG products, there's a very linear relationship there. The more ESG is in a product, the more repeat purchase. And repeat purchase is loyalty. That's a great thing, not only for your top line, but retailers like it too. They don't just look at dollars per inch, they look at loyalty. They don't want to lose the whole basket.
Yeah. It is here to stay, and it's only going to keep becoming more and more of a groundswell. younger shoppers are particularly driving the sustainability demand. While 77% of all shoppers certainly believe sustainability is important, and by the way, 8 full points up versus 2 years ago, you can also see the bar on the left is really the younger cohorts, and they're really the ones driving it. And as we think about what they're looking for, next slide, without going through everything, we heard it again a lot yesterday. Consumers want more information. This industry has done a phenomenal job of training consumers about food and how to understand what's in your food. Now we need to up the game and do the same thing around sustainability and what's good for our planet and what's good for our communities. We've got to figure out how to get, whether it's, again, blending the digital and the in-store experience by putting your disclosures in an easy code to get to what your brand's disclosures are and what you're doing around sustainability, or whether it's around supporting certifications. Consumers want to put their money with sustainable brands, and we all need to make it easier as retailers and as individuals to make that really come as a reality.
And I just wanted to take a quick opportunity, because in this landscape, navigating all of that, all of those certifications, all of the ESG claims and sustainability claims, which it's amazing that consumers or that brands that invest in that are outperforming. But how do you navigate that? So New Hope has a new platform called Beacon Discovery that we are launching to help buyers do just that, find the right products based on their ingredient needs, sustainability requirements, and values. And so you can learn so much more if you head to our booth. It's on the North Hall at the second level, and you can learn a lot more about Beacon Discovery. We're really excited about what this might enable in the industry.
So the data also shows that companies that embrace diversity and actually are effective with it are outperforming from a revenue gain level too. What we did is we basically took the Nielsen IQ panel data and we looked at all of the brands by the top 20 CPGs and what was their percent white versus not. And we looked at basically the ones that were above 68%, which was the average in the panel, and the ones that were below. And the growth of the ones above was 4% versus 0.6% for the ones below. We took a sample of small companies, did the same thing, much wider dispersion of percent white, so a much wider gap in growth. We use SPINS data to figure out the sell-through, to figure out that brand by brand growth, to get rid of M&A and other things to keep the integrity. So when we talk about how can we as an industry, essentially make money through JEDI, this is it right here, in getting diversity and empowering it. So what we would think about is, if we want an expansive mindset to this, and we think about kind of the structure of companies, right now in many companies, DEI and sustainability is a cost center. So I would propose that we change it to a profit center. And we can actually use the percent white in the product's customer base, the ultimate customers who are eating the product or drinking the product or taking it, whatever they're doing. If that number goes down, then DEI has been effective. Everything else in the organization could fail. The brand manager might do a bad job, the category might be off, who names it. But if that goes down more than the market, DEIs can be empowered. They can have revenue responsibility, they can have real budgets, and real empowerment to do their job. And that will increase the revenue of big brands, small brands, everybody in this industry. It'll be a very big paradigm shift. So today is International Women's Day. And that's, we're and so we had to bring this slide in because this is something that I think is just amazing. The World Economic Forum every year puts out their gender gap report. It's a 400-page report. It's got a great 3-page summary. And when you look at this report, they rank every country in the world based on their gender parity. So what we did is we figured, well, there's got to be some significance here to economic growth in that. So we took a look at the top 5 countries in the world, and we took a look at the US. And if you look at the last 20 years, those top 5 countries in gender parity had 20% more economic growth than the US. And it just makes sense, right? If you have more empowerment and more people working to grow an economy in an empowered fashion, then it will. So my daughter, Katie, actually wrote an essay from her school on that 3-page summary. And after she wrote her 200 words, she said to me, and I had to put this in here, because one of the things in there is it says, projects we're 135 years away from total gender parity, and we're only 12 years away in survivability, healthcare, and education. And so she basically said, hey, if we're 135 years away in total parity, but the 3 most important things, healthcare, survivability, education, the 3 big ingredients, we're only 12, then the difference has to be stigma. And it's just amazing to me, if a 15-year-old can figure that out, then why can't the rest of society? So, closing, one of the things that I think is really interesting in thinking about economic growth is, there's this notion of how much do you know in the world, and then there's what you don't know that you don't know. But then there's this whole pool, which is much, much bigger, of the things that you don't know. And that's where diversity comes in. Bringing people in, empowering them to teach you what you don't know that you don't know. Because if you knew everything, you'd do everything right? You would make no mistakes. So the more that you do that, the more effective your diversity is. So there's, Jennifer Ambrose has a great thing about the feminine economy. And when I took a look at some of the principles she had around her, some of the kind of characteristics, I was thinking, if you look at our economy today and the way we, grow business and approach things, if we look at complex problems with a bigger tool set, we're going to be more effective. Again, the what you don't know that you don't know. And so when I look at the things around the ring on the left, and I think about, what's going to solve the, problems and make business work better and actually empower and get to gender parity and drive economic growth and drive revenue growth, there's a lot of great nuggets right there. And so we thought that was a good way to close.